So what do you want to talk about? Cut that out. Okay. Well, I think that even though it was our first fight in January, I think that we put our stake in the ground November 15th with the last fight with Tito and Bonner, and that's kind of I wanted the people to see that this is the future of what we're heading towards with these big tentpole events and with the big production. Our monthly shows, we're going to continue them, and we're going to do some shows at the casinos that we're currently have deals with, and then we're going to do some bigger venues in different cities. So, we're going to have 12 events like we've talked about, and then we're going to have 4 big tentpole events. But the tentpole events will grow, and what I mean by that is next year we want to do 6, the year after we want to do 8, and then the year after that we want to do maybe 10 or 12. So eventually the program will be a total of 24 fights, and it'll be 12 tentpole events and 12 of the monthly shows too. So
is the relationship of the Friday shows, are they kind of comparable to, I guess, the Strikeforce Challengers, and the tentpoles are going to be like the Saturday shows? Is that comparable?
You know what? I don't think it's comparable because Strikeforce Challengers, although we had some great talent come out of there, our main events were not like what we're doing now, where you have Pitbull fighting Strauss. I mean, that's a main event that did some great numbers on Spike TV. And Strikeforce Challengers didn't have that. It was just strictly a Challengers show feeding new talent. So this one on the undercard, we have some guys that we're looking at, and we're thinking about maybe building them up and getting them to a point where they can get some big fights. But the top part of that card already are guys that could be fighting on tentpole events, and you might see them go back and forth. And what's funny was I was talking to Pitbull before he left Pachenga. He's like, "Scott, one thing." I said, "What?" And his eyes all messed up, and he's he had been in a war with Strauss, right? Yeah. And he said, "I want to talk to you." I said, "Well, what do you want to talk about?" He's like, I want to fight on a tentpole. Because I want to walk down the ramp. I want to see my name, and so it means a lot to them that when they can come out in lights and see the production value of these big tentpole events, it's a special thing for them. But traditionally, on Saturday night, you'll see our biggest fighters, and you'll see the biggest matchups, which means that when we have a big fight, a big matchup that maybe we could have put on a monthly show, we're gonna move that to the big show. Although February 27th will be a Friday night because the Saturday wasn't available.
Do you have any fights in mind that you want to put forward that you're thinking about already that you might want to?
Well, I mean, we signed Kimbo, right?
Yeah.
So he's going to fight in a big tentpole event. We haven't signed his opponent yet, and we're talking to a few people. So we'll have probably something to announce in the next month or so. But he definitely will be a big character, larger-than-life character. Coming into one of our big shows.
We talked in the past about maybe doing one-night tournaments or Grand Prix or in the ring or something. Any plans for those coming up or not?
You know what? We talked about a couple options of doing tournaments. Doing a one-night tournament, doing a two-night tournament, but definitely not a series of like across the whole year. But we just haven't gotten that far down the road with it because when we started working on like the tournament, it's like there's some opportunities like to sign Kimbo or have these other fighters fight, and so I think that we'll get there before the end of the year. But that's probably going to be something we do in the late third or fourth quarter.
And now, you've talked in the past that that you're looking for not only looking to get new young talent to sign to find, but to also get free agents. On the free agent front, you're expecting a bunch of free agents to come up in the future to test the market, or are you pleased with what's happened, or are you surprised that we haven't heard any big names yet?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, we've only, been, from the time I came on till this interview, it's been 7 months, right? And the plan really was to come into Bellator and not do the weekly shows. So I sat down with Spike TV, and they're like, okay, we'll just regroup, and we won't even do the first show until September, October, and we'll do this big tentpole event, and we'll relaunch it. But then, we found out after the fact that it wasn't realistic because so many sponsorship commitments, so many international sales commitments. So there's so many commitments on the books. I literally came to the company and it's like, boom, here we go. There was a fight, like I want to say, like in 3 weeks, and then within 8 weeks, we were like running full speed. And so, now we've had time after November 15th to start planning the future now. But before that, honestly, it was like, I came in here and we were going. So as far as, planning, fighters, free agents, building from the ground up, those are all things that will happen. And you'll see some free agents pop up this year. You know.
For you, what is success going forward for you? And I guess what is success for the guys signing the checks? What's going to be the benchmarks for Bellator's is a success?
You know what? I think there's 3 things, and I think that we've already accomplished 3 of them already.
Yeah.
You know, one is putting the best fighters, you know, putting great fights on. You know, 2, delivering ratings, right? And then 3 is putting butts in seats. That's really how, you know, that's our report card, is are we putting great fights on that the fans want to see? Are we getting great ratings on Spike TV? Are we putting butts in seats because fans want to see these fights? And I think that the one thing, and maybe the 4th thing that's kind of out there when I think about Bellator is it deserving, is it getting the respect that it deserves now compared to a year ago? And I think that there's been a big climate change in the perception of Bellator and the direction we're heading. I think people are pleased with it. And I think, you know, it's a good thing. It's a good time right now for Bellator, and it's just like a relaunch. Basically, it's like they had 5 years or 4 years of tournaments and kind of going into this format. But tournaments are challenging. I've done it. You know, I've seen other people do it. It's a challenging business. And you know, when I came in here, they already had a great roster. We added a couple guys, and then now we're going to add a couple more guys, and then pretty soon some free agents will pop open, and then some of our guys will become stars from the ground up. And then you'll see, you know, us reshuffle this deck a little bit, and then it's going to be on. I mean, it's going to be an exciting time.
Now, Spike just announced they not only have Glory, they're keeping kickboxing, they have boxing coming in.
Right.
What's your thoughts on having all these combat sports in Spike? And I guess, is there any thoughts of maybe having some sort of synergy between them, or have you put any thought into how you'd use those other combat sports?
Well, I know that they'll you know, use all 3 different brands and promote each other, you know, and I think that it's a great idea because I love boxing still, and I'm one of the guys that grew up watching boxing, and I love martial arts. And to me, it's like, you know, where else would you go on a Friday night, you know, other than Spike TV to watch combat sports? So to me, that's going to be the destination for fight fans that want to come check out, you know, combat sports and boxing, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. So they have the whole thing covered.
Any talk of letting some of you guys try boxing?
You know what? That's a good question. And I tell you, you'd be surprised. I've had 3 of our fighters, I don't want to mention their names, contact me and say, I want to get a boxing fight. And I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. I said, all right, well, let me talk to Spike, and maybe we'll let him. I mean, I have no problem letting him do it. Yeah. You know, go, you want to go try boxing? Feel free. I'd love to have you try it.
There's a lot of complaints amongst fighters about the type of contracts in MMA. Would you like to see some sort of straight guidelines that all promoters follow for contracts? Do you believe there should be some rules in effect that certain limits on these contract provisions or not?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I think something needs to change. What it is, I haven't pinpointed yet, but I think something needs to change. And I think that to get all the promoters on the same page is going to be really challenging, unless it comes, you know, from the government or something that's, you know, government mandated. But you know, everybody's just kind of running their own business, right? So you have 10 different versions of a contract. But you know, I think that something needs to change because you know, I think making a more competitive landscape. If there was something.
You know, there's the Muhammad Ali Reform Boxing Act that supposedly protects. Would you like to see something like that in MMA that sets out the guidelines of what can be in a contract and what can be allowed in MMA?
You know what? I'm not saying that the Muhammad Ali Act would apply to MMA, but I think that, like I said, something needs to be done. And I think that if it was fair, you know, because there's 2 sides to every story, right? There's the fighter side, there's the promoter side. We've always tried to make it a fair, you know, relationship. So I think that if somebody really understood the promotion side of the business and took into account what it takes on this side, and came, you know, to the table with something that would work for both sides and not just one side or the other, you know. Yeah. So maybe it's over here right now. Maybe it needs to shift back a little bit. But if it goes way over here, then I think then you're gonna have problems because, you know, now it's gonna create a whole other set of problems.
I guess the current condition, would you say it's much more in the promoter's advantage the way contracts are than the fighters, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that
at least certain provisions.
I think that you know, I can't get into the contracts specifically, but I think that, you know what, I think that we operate a fight company that we deal with our fighters in a very fair manner, you know, and so it is you know, I can't speak to other organizations' contracts. You probably know more about that than I do, so you could probably speak to it better than me. But you know, I think that our contracts are fair, and you know, we treat our fighters with respect, and you know, something that if they ever had a problem, they can come to us.
Some of the provisions that fighters have been complaining about that they find really egregious, if those are in their contract, is that something you would change?
We definitely would have a conversation, and it depends on what the situation was. I don't think any fighter would come to us with the same issue, because I've never you know, had that happen before. They all come to us with different issues, and we, you know, there's what's language with lawyers and the paper, and then there's the spirit of the agreement, right? And I'm about making a fair deal, something that works for you and something that works for us. We need to protect some rights because we're going to own the footage, and we're going to own the footage in perpetuity. We do international deals. We do, you know, different kind of footage deals. So we're going to have some rights, but that doesn't mean you couldn't come and sit down and we could have a fair conversation.
Now, I'm sure you've heard the complaint in the antitrust suit was the idea that UFC owns your image rights forever, perpetuity. Is that something that Bellator has no interest in, or is that something that would, you know, that's up to individual fighters? Or?
Well, I would think that our rights, you know, and again, I don't want to get too deep into it because, you know, I can't speak about our contracts, or it's a very, you know, so
yeah, I know it's
like
there's
Tracy will come over here and start yelling at me,
yeah.
But you know, the really issue is, you know, we need to have protection as well, right? And so we need to have the rights. I mean, we have to have some rights to where we can show the footage and, you know, and own the footage. Otherwise, you know, it's
but beyond that, the idea that besides the footage, the owner, the name, and the image rights and stuff that's Bellator is not interested in, or is that?
Well, I think that you know, when you say the name, I mean, we're not in the business of owning your name as a fighter. You know, we're not gonna trademark your name. You know, that's.
But that's in some contracts,
right?
Yeah.
So,
but is it so specifically you use it for promotional reasons for the fight that took place? But you're not going to come back and say, no, we're going to make Will Brooks T-shirts and we get to do that, you know, or put them in a video game without his knowledge in the future.
Right. I mean, that's not the business that we're in. We're in the fight business and we're in the broadcast business, and so we need to protect our rights for the fight business and the broadcast business, and that's really what, you know, 90% of our core business is in the broadcast and then the live event.
Okay. Now, the complaint is that commissions don't have the resources and also the authority to do the proper all-year drug testing. So is that something in the future of Bellator that eventually you guys will go to round-the-clock out-of-competition testing? Or,
you know, my position has always been, you know, this is something that the commissions regulate, like California, Nevada, New Jersey, and I still feel that way. Let the commissions regulate. This is what they do, because if we try to self-regulate it, there could be a lot of problems, as you've seen recently, right? So to me, they're the experts, and I think, you know, like Lorenzo said, we'll support them. We'll support them to help run it.
Would you like to see, like, the ABC get together and say, we're going to have a national drug testing policy, for especially the major promotions? Is that something you think would be the smarter way to do it?
I mean, I would think, the answer is yes. Would that be a great thing? Yes. But to get everybody on the same page, and that would be the challenge, is trying to get everybody on the same page. But yeah, if that service was there and that happened, we would jump in, for sure. But I just don't think it's built like that way right now.
What do you think is the optimum method of cleaning up the sport, drug testing? Would you like to see Nevada and other states do more out of competition, start testing 3 months before, and start doing CRI testing?
Well, to me, I think that I can only speak for our league and where we're going, but everywhere we go, you know, the fighters are always tested, you know, and especially the main event, semi-main events.
But that's the testing on the day. The complaint is that sometimes gets...
No.
Did they do it random before?
No, let me tell you. When we signed Tito and Bonner to do the fight, I got a call from Andy Foster, and he said, I need Tito and Bonner both to check in 48 hours. And this is like 6 weeks before the fight. Check in 40, and then they had to do it like 3 weeks before the fight. So they did test them, you know, like once they know that you're coming. Mike Mazzulli, same thing at the Mohegan Sun, he does the same thing. I need you to test this guy and test this guy. They set it up. They call the lab. What city are you in? They call the lab. The fighter has to report down there.
I guess, what about out-of-competition testing? Because that's the big thing too, is that maybe they'll be testing when you sign the fight deal. But new tests say steroids help you years after you use them. It's the guys out of competition using stuff to get in shape. I guess, how do you get commissions to start testing that?
See, that's where there's a slippery slope there, right? Because you know, you engage in this testing, and then there's out-of-competition testing, and then, you know, there could be, I think it has to be unified in order for it to work. And so I think that we would have to probably get all of us together on the same page, like you said, to create like an ABC type testing procedure to be effective. Otherwise, it's just I don't think it's going to work. I think it has to be all done collectively.
Yeah. Tell us about your visit to Japan. Is there a future for MMA in Japan?
Yeah. Actually, it was really nice to go back there and visit some old friends and visit the event on New Year's Eve that IGF threw. It was Antonio Inoki's. As they do pro wrestling for half of the show and they do MMA for the second half of the show. But you know, I feel like Japan is going to be a great market again one day for MMA. You know, and I think that they're waiting for the right opportunity. And what I mean, they're waiting. I'm talking about the fans. I mean, you know the kind of fans they have in Japan. They're passionate. They're unbelievable. But it has to be the right product. And I feel that they want to have their own product, like Pride was. Pride was a Japanese product. K1 was a Japanese product, made for Japan, looked like and felt like a Japanese product, and was broadcast in Japan through Japanese television. K1 did fights all over the world, but really the core business was in Tokyo. That was where the World Grand Prix was held. That's where Fuji TV is. That's where K1 headquarters was. And I think that Japan really is waiting. They're in hibernation, is what somebody told me. They're just waiting, you know. They're waiting. Somebody told me they're sleeping until the next big Japanese promotion comes, and then, you know, they'll go support it.
And now, do you think the revival of pro wrestling in Japan might be the Kickstarter? Because it always seems to be pro wrestling led to MMA in Japan.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand the significance of how pro wrestling has impacted MMA. Yeah. But really, it's in Japan, it's like this. And there's really not much difference. A pro wrestler in Japan could easily come into MMA because their style of wrestling is much harder than, let's say, the wrestling here in America. And so like Fujita or, you know, some of the other fighters that made the crossover, it was pretty simple. And I think that there's a resurgence of Japanese pro wrestling, but I think that they're gonna wait till they find that one big Japanese star, and then they'll launch into a new league.
The new Saku or something.
Yeah, the Sakuraba, or, you know, it could be Masato, or, you know, like that new star, that Japanese Elvis Presley, you know, or whoever. That's what the right. Genki Sudo was how much fun was that guy to watch?
Are you ever gonna have a guy walk out with an opening as impressive as his?
You know what? I hope we do.
Would that bankrupt the company?
No, I hope we do. I mean, it was entertaining. It was by far the best fighter entrances I've ever seen. But there's been some great ones over there. I mean, you know, everything like Mayhem Miller and his little dance troupe, and, you know, he's like Genki Sudo. I mean, yeah, it's like they had the best entrances, and what I loved about it is, like, as soon as you hear, you know, the lights go out, as soon as you hear the music, you already know who it is. Like the first bar, boom, oh, that's, you know, that's Mirko Krokop, or that's so and so, or that's Bob Sapp, or that's, you know, and then the video comes on. The presentation is just unlike anything I've ever seen, you know, and. Like we were talking earlier, walking into the Osaka Dome in '97 with K1 when I was there to visit Mr. Ishii. It's the first time I met him, actually, and walking into the Osaka Dome and walking through the tunnel and walking out going, oh my God, this place it's like to the rafters. It's like Dodger Stadium packed to the rafters. There's 50,000 people in here, you know, and the production was just way over the top, and I was just like, this is unbelievable. This is the future. And you know, that's why I cut a deal, because I wanted to really see how they did it and how they, you know, their TV deals worked and the production and everything. It was a great learning experience for me, you know, to work for them for. I think I stayed with them for like 8-9 years.
Before we forget, you told me a story about Bob Sapp that you were going to tell me.
Yeah.
That you were saving.
So, you know, we're in the fight business, right? And K1 was, when I was working for K1, this is probably 2003 or 4, and Bob had come from pro wrestling and NFL, right? So he comes into the K1 and he's watching, and I'm like, "What do you think, Bob?" You know, he's like, "Oh yeah, this, you know, I think I could do this." So we sent him to train with Matt Hume, right, in Seattle, and so he has a fight 6 weeks later, or whatever, and then he goes back to Seattle living. And how much he was training, I'm not sure, but you know, we stay in touch, and he's become a bigger star in Japan. Then he fights Ernesto Hoost, and I'll never forget, I was there. Boom! Ernesto Hoost was beating him up, but boom, down goes the Hoost, right? Gets up, and then Bob knocks him out, stops the fight. Then Bob becomes this megastar, right? And then he has a couple more fights, and then December he fights Hoost again. Same thing, boom, down goes Hoost, the greatest kickboxer of all time in K1, and Bob knocks him out twice. So Bob becomes you can't even go out the street with him. I'm not kidding. In Tokyo, he was like the Beatles. I'm not. It's like being with Elvis Presley, honestly. Because I go, Bob, let's go eat. You know, it's time, we're in Japan. Let's go eat. He's like, I can't go out there, man. I'm like, you just forget because you think it's just, you know, Bob, we're hanging out. But he could not go anywhere in Tokyo. And so he fights Hoost, and Hoost kicks his legs, you know, like did tremendous damage on Bob's legs and hit Bob, and Bob took a lot of damage in the fight. And then we're on the bus on the way back to Narita, and he said something to me, and I'll never forget it. It was like yesterday. He said, you know, Scott, this really hurts. Like, they're really hitting me. You know, in his mind, it was like pro wrestling. Like, he was a pro wrestler that had become a real fighter, but he still was thinking of it as pro wrestling. And I said, Bob, you've got to really train. These are the most dangerous strikers in the planet. And it's not going to get easier. It's going to get harder. So you got to train hard. He's like, yeah, I'm going to train hard. But the fact that he said to me, God, this really hurts. Like, this stuff, like K1 really hurts. I was just like, oh my God, he had no idea what he was getting into when he accepted the contract. And the success that he had in Japan was unlike any other fighter I've ever seen, because the other fighters have become popular, but here's a guy that was making millions in endorsement deals. I was in Japan going somewhere, and I see a big Bob Sapp Panasonic billboard, big Bob Sapp Coca-Cola billboard, you know, Pizza Hut. I mean, it was like, you know, he was like a brand ambassador for all these different brands in Japan. And, you know, he had crossed over from just being a fighter to a celebrity personality in Japan. And that was the big difference. So he did very well over there. And I think he's still doing well over there. So I'm pro wrestle.
Lately, I've noticed with the UFC, new promos, they're bringing in guys like CM Punk, maybe doing fights that are a little more gimmicky and stuff. Would you say that, do you think that has more to do with maybe the downturn pay-per-views? Do you think that has to do with your influence? Is the products too similar now between yours and theirs? Or?
No, I don't think so. I think that our staging and our production and our, you know, it's completely different than what they're doing. Yeah. You know, fighters that they sign, I don't know. I'm not sure really what goes through the thought process. Yeah. But somebody told me, I can't remember who it was, but a reporter came to me and said, what's ironic is, you know, we're like the wrestling, you know, people say, oh, you're like the, you know, the fun league, you do fun fights and this and that. But yet on the 15th, you know, we signed Aaron Pico, and then shortly thereafter they signed CM Punk, right? Which is completely opposite, right? But so the thing is, you know what? I think that they see the value in that. You know, there's gonna be some value in a guy that can bring big eyeballs to your league.
Herschel Walker.
You know, the thing about Herschel that people don't understand was he was a real martial artist, right? And I think I might have told you the story, but we gave him a workout, a tryout, and we took him down to Legends Gym here in LA, and we had him grapple. And we had him wrestle with a Division I wrestler and kickbox. And excuse me, and I was skeptical because at first I told his manager, no, we're not doing it. I'm not going to be the sleazeball promoter that gets Herschel Walker beat up on national TV, right? But Herschel, I sat down with him and he said, no, Scott, I really want to do it. I'm still a good athlete. I have good speed, good agility. I can still fight. And so I flew Bob Cook down, met at Legends Gym. And I had arranged through Chris Riley, you know, these 3 different guys, and he kickboxed the first guy. And I said, you know what? He still has some good twitch speed. Like his twitch speed was so fast, and that he wrestled with this Division I wrestler from Purdue, and you know, he basically could hold his own with this wrestler. And one time I remember he was on his back and the guy taking Herschel down, and Herschel was trying to push off and create some room, and Bob's telling him, turn to your side, you know, push off the guy. And Herschel just picked him up and just bench pressed him off of him. You know, and he goes, is that what you mean? I'm like, holy crap. But I was like, that's not what I mean, but that's great. Yeah. So he's freaky strong. I mean, just, you know, like with that super athlete, freaky strong. And then he had his hardest time with the jiu-jitsu, you know, because that's really not his forte. And but Bob Cook said to me, I asked Bob, what do you think, Bob? You know, this is in your hands. And to Bob's credit, he didn't even know who Herschel Walker was. Bob's just like a martial arts guy, you know, and he's like, well, who is this? Is he some kind of, you know, is this a big deal? Or, you know, it's kind of a big deal, Bob. Like, you got to tell me, like, what do you think? I mean, do we want to have him come compete? And he said, I think he's good enough, because if you give him 6 months in AKA, have him train with Kane and DC, Luke, all the boys over here, then we can get him ready for his first fight. And so that was the deal. I told Herschel, you have to come to San Jose. You have to live at this camp. And you have to commit to for 6 months, put your life on hold, and move from Dallas and be here. And he said, okay, yeah. And I thought, that's it, I'll never hear from him again, right? That Monday, he was in San Jose at AK at 12 noon, was the first guy there and the last guy to leave. Wow. And he stayed for 6 months straight and checked in the Fairmont Hotel and stayed there until his first fight was ready.
Do you see the positives for fighters organizing, making a union? Is that something you would, not that you have any say either way, but is that something you can understand and say, yeah, I could see why fighters, or that's something maybe you didn't say, I could, if I was a fighter, I might want to have a union or association protecting me?
You know what, I tell you, I think this is an individual sport.
Yeah.
This is not a team sport, right? And so, like a baseball union, that's a team. A basketball, football, these are all teams. This is an individual sport. You compare it to boxing, or I'm not sure what other individual sport, generates this kind of revenue. But I don't know if it's made for a union. I do believe this, though. I think that there is an evolution happening right now in the sport, and I think that the end result of this, of where it's supposed to head, I think will happen. Yeah. And what that is today, I can't answer, but there is some change. I could feel it. I could just feel the difference of, let's say, when we were running Strikeforce and back in 2009, 10, 11. I feel a difference in how it feels, and how there's some pushback now a little bit on this, and then the drug testing and all the there's some activity, there's movement, and I think the sport's going to be fine.